Hear me okay?
Yep. What's up, Matt and Bobby Shaw, the man, the myth, the legend behind this book. We'll be back in 1 minute to talk cutting some onions. Bobby, besides being the good man behind the camera, tell us about the book, tell us about you, and then we'll get into today's topic.
Hey, man, thanks very much. Yeah, absolutely. I wrote the book, Cutting Onions, which is all about the leadership lessons I've learned in the restaurant industry that kind of chronicled my 3-decade career in the industry, starting from my career at McDonald's through my time at Chipotle and beyond. And I wrote it because I just felt like there were so many foundational lessons that I had learned as a young leader that I just wanted to share. And I just thought it might be helpful to a larger audience. And so that's really what the book is all about. I talk a lot about building culture. I talk a lot about how to build high-performing teams. I'm a longtime restaurant industry executive. I've been in the business since I was in high school. And the last 4 years or so, I've been consulting, helping restaurant owners and leaders, helping them to get their organizations ready to scale and grow. And so that's what I've been up to these last few years.
Love it. And just like cutting onions is tough because it makes your eyes water. You don't want to do it.
Right.
So are reading books and educating yourself and taking your skill to the next level. So that's the first thing I want to talk about is page 71 of the book talks about developing yourself as a leader. And I can relate to this because I've seen myself in many stages. I'm 45 now. I've got around 40 employees and contractors that work for our current company.
Right.
We're growing. We'll be at 60 within 3 months.
That's amazing.
Yeah, crazy too. But I also, before this, for a 7-year period of time, it was me and Ashley. So I managed Matt Plapp, which was, man, it's a nightmare, but I managed to do it. Before that, we had a boat dealership, and I was in my early to mid 20s to my early 30s. We got up to 47 employees, 3 locations. And I look back and all of the problems our business had that Matt Plapp back in his 20s thought were that mechanic's fault, that sales guy's fault, that parts guy's fault.
Yep.
Was all because of me not doing my job. It wasn't their fault. It was that I didn't do my job. But what I've seen as a transition this past 4 years with me, I read a book. I mean, these are just the books I've read the past month.
Right.
Working Backwards, The Ultimate Marketing Plan, Hacking Growth, A World Without Email, Marketing Outrageously. And then there's also one here I couldn't find. I wanted to show was Deep Work.
Yep.
All of them, what I found, what reason they 4 of the 5 there drew to me was they're helping me work on something to make me better. Because if I don't develop me, how can I expect my team to become better? So let's talk about that chapter. Let's talk about developing yourself.
Yeah, I think it's a really important part of the equation that a lot of people I don't think they think about, because so much as leaders we're told that we have to develop our replacement. We have to, create future leaders. And that's, of course, true. But along the way, I think this is really 2 parts to this conversation, Matt. I think it's number one, who's actually developing you?
Yep.
Who's investing into you? Who's actually pouring into you? I think that's a whole nother podcast that we could certainly spend time on that. But in terms of really developing yourself, I mean, the most important person that you're going to develop is you, because if you're not in a position where you feel like you're contributing, where you feel like you're able to pour into other people, then you just won't. Yep. And then what you're going to end up with is a team that's very stagnant and very uninspired, right? It's what we used to call the unenlightened leader. And we went through a time at Chipotle where this was pre-IPO and pre all the rocket ship growth that we had, where we had some leaders in the organization that were just kind of on cruise control. They weren't really doing anything to make themselves better. They weren't innovating. They weren't creating momentum within their own development. And that, when you develop yourself as a leader, it gives you fuel in the tank. You have more fuel in the tank, and you can inspire other leaders around you. And that's exactly why it's important that you're reading those books. I love that you're doing that. I'm an Audible guy. And if you saw my Audible library, I mean, I've got just tons of audiobooks. Yeah. But like there are probably 5 or 6 books that have really, over the years, that I've read that have really resonated with me and just created this kind of new way of thinking about things that I hadn't really thought of before. And that's how you get inspired. And that's all from yourself, right? That's all from yourself. When you're reading books, you're listening to books, you might be listening to a podcast, you might be going to a conference. all those things are incredibly important. One of the things that I do every year is I make sure I attend at least one leadership conference a year, one that I really love, where I know that I'm going to learn just so much from. And then I just come back and I just pour that into other people. One of the things I learned a long time ago, and I heard this, and I think it's absolutely true, is that it's not my job to fill your cup. It's my job to fill my cup so much so that it overflows.
Yep.
And then you're able to catch it.
Yeah. The couple of things unpacked there that get my attention. Number one, that what I think of, and I tell this story a lot, was Gary Vee. I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Of course.
Most marketing people are. A lot of people aren't. And I remember about, probably 7-8 years ago, I found Gary Vee really early, maybe even longer than that. And after about 3 or 4 months, I got rid of him in my life. I quit following him. I quit listening because he was talking way over my head. I remember telling him, there's this guy in New York. He's on a plane way up here. I'm in a bus. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. Right. And then flash forward to 2018, I heard that he was the keynote speaker at Traffic Conversions in 17 or 16. I went back, watched the video. Well, in that 15, 16, 17, I reinvested from literally 08 to 2015. Matt Plapp never invested a penny in a coach. I didn't read. I didn't up my game. I didn't go to conferences because I was smarter than every restaurateur I was dealing with marketing.
Yep.
That didn't matter. I was way smarter than them. We were doing cool stuff. 2015 came along and I'm at a wall. I'm at a crossroads. What's the next level? Well, I got a coach, Billie Jean Shaw, out of California. I started reading more. I started going to conferences. Well, when I watched that video of Gary Vee at Traffic Conversions, 2016, I think keynote speech, maybe 17, I encourage anybody to watch it. It's still relevant. Everything he said, I understood. And It wasn't because he was talking over my head back then. It was because Matt Plapp hadn't invested in myself enough throughout the years that everything sounded like a different language to me.
Right. Well, I think that you bring up something there. I'm glad you mentioned the word coach, because I just read a great blog post the other day from Seth Godin, who's a marketing genius, right? I mean, the guy's the king of the 200-word blog post. I mean, it's just amazing, right? What he can get across in 2 sentences.
Quick.
And one of the things he said, and you kind of alluded to this, is that, when people kind of balk at getting a coach, when people I don't need a coach. I've got this dialed in. My business is doing really well. I'm really successful. Well, all the reasons that you think you don't need a coach are exactly the reasons why you need a coach, and people just don't get that. Right. So that I think that's kind of coming around again as a topic of conversation. And that is another great way to invest in yourself for sure.
And then going back, that was the other part I wanted to unpack, was a coach. And I think if you look at both these topics, if you think about it, you're in preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, you play peewee baseball, you t-ball, you play baseball, you play not me, I go off to college, I play sports. You get out of college, you don't have any tests anymore.
Nope.
You don't think you need to read. You spend your time reading Fox News and CNN and Sports Illustrated. You don't have a coach because you really don't know what they are. I honestly didn't know what a coach was at that capacity. Now I've had Billie Jean Shaw, who's amazing, was my coach for 2016, 17, and part of 18. Chris Patterson out of Jacksonville, Florida, another amazing guy, was my coach for most of 18, 19. And now Josh Nelson, who I'm flying to Miami, Florida in 2 weeks for his event, has been my coach since last July. And, I told a friend of mine the other day, I got a buddy of mine who's a pretty successful entrepreneur, makes a lot of money. He's a complete shit show when it comes to running his life and his business. And he admits it to some extent. Right. And I said, dude, what do you think of me from a standpoint of my ability? He goes, dude, you're one of the best I know. I said, then why do I have a coach and you don't? You're telling me you don't need one. I can run circles around you. And the reason I'm going to continue to run circles around you is because I have somebody telling me how to run the damn circle and giving me feedback.
Absolutely.
Bouncing an ideal for people, getting that. But then also the kind of that goes along with both those items is that event I'm going to in 2 weeks. I'll get to spend time with Josh, but I'll also spend time with about 30 people at or above or a little below my level in different parts of their world. And I think, especially in the restaurant world, a lot of restaurateurs, and it's been tough the last year to get out of your kitchen because of staffing and the pandemic and all that. But a lot of restaurateurs don't get out of their four walls and learn how to take it to the next level.
Yep. Yep. No, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think the other thing to keep in mind here too, Matt, and, I just kind of looked this up. I wrote this 8 years ago. There's a big difference between coaching and consulting and, mentoring. Those are three different things, right? Coaching, the way I kind of view coaching is kind of a place to play. When you're a coach of someone, or you actually are being coached, that, they're drawing something out of you that's already there, and then they create a space for that to happen. And it's encouraging, to have that person be able to empower you to move ahead with ideas and concepts that you might be thinking. I mean, sometimes a coach is just a great person to have there in the room to listen to you.
To listen, right? Set of ears.
Absolutely. It's so important.
Yeah. And it's kind of comical. You said that to Josh. I had to call him 2 weeks ago. I texted him, say, hey, can we hop on a quick phone call? I got an idea I want to bounce off you.
Right.
I just want you to hear what I'm saying, because a lot of times you say something,
yep,
and when you're telling somebody, you're like, oh yeah, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Or,
yeah.
Oh, I get it now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The words come out of your mouth and you're like, that's a horrible idea.
Yeah.
Or you're like, hey, wait, that sounds really good. So it works both ways.
Okay. Next topic. This is something that I accept that I've done it, that I think a lot of us do as leaders. And a lot of it comes down to who's really to blame. Like, I heard something the other day. It was actually Gary Vee. Gary Vee is like, hey, I got a question for you. This guy said, I got a question. You know how Gary is brutally honest and everything. And the guy asked, I've had this problem with hiring people for my business. I had to fire this guy for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason. He goes,
yep.
Oh, you're firing the wrong person. What do you mean? He goes, fire yourself.
Yep.
You're the problem. You're either hiring incorrectly or you're a terrible leader.
Yep.
Because the people aren't getting out of it. And I think, one of my guests a while back was talking about restaurateurs, talking about, you can't coach people. You can't hire certain people. My son is 17, started a pizza place a couple weeks ago. I went up there and had pizza dinner. And it was pretty cool. He actually made the pizza that I ate, which I got a kick out of it, seeing him back there.
Right.
And this person said, Matt, everybody says this generation, the kids. And he's like, but it's funny. That same generation, you got a band director at a high school who somehow gets 160 kids to march exactly like ants in these very complex patterns. And then every year, 25% of them leave and 25% are new, and they don't miss a beat.
Yep.
That band director and his systems and team are the reason that happens. It's the same with the restaurant.
That's right. This is all about accountability. And one of the things that I've been very, very lucky over the years that I've had mentors and people that have really modeled this well for me. But I'll tell you, this is true today it's as true today as it ever has been. And that is using the word we, right? Even as a consultant for these last 4 years, I say we. When I'm talking about a problem, I was just with a client today, and I use the word we all the time, right? It's not my business. I'm not the one that's writing the check. I'm not the one that's ultimately on the hook for the responsibility and for the, but I'm saying we, right? I think when you, as a leader, you have to immerse yourself into whatever it is that you're involved in. And you have to become a part of the solution versus saying it's not my problem, it's yours. Because I think when you do that, you create what I call the 3Ds. You create denial, you create defensiveness, and you create deflection.
Yeah.
And those three things are not where we want to be. And great leaders in the context of an organization realize that they're accountable for all of those results, no matter if they're the person in the building or not. Whatever happens. Yeah. And so I think that's incredibly important. So when you do that, you create this feeling of accountability amongst the team. We're like, oh my gosh, Matt's taking accountability for that. That's not even really Matt's responsibility, but he's taking responsibility for that. That makes me want to take responsibility for that, right? Because I don't want Matt taking responsibility for that. I don't want Bobby taking responsibility for that. And so you create this, feeling of accountability. But more than that, you create trust. You create trust within the organization. And that really does help to serve as a beacon for the rest of the organization. It helps to really create that culture. And I think that's really important.
And this happened to me. And I always try and lead by example. I always try and digest things. And I'm a pretty even keel guy. I don't get upset over stuff. Just shit happens. You go on your way. But yesterday, for example, we had a mistake happen in our company. And I called the employee. We talked about it for a second. When I got off the phone, I was like, my gosh, I can't believe he did that. And then I'm like, hold on. He did it because I didn't lay out the ground rules good enough. And like later on, we talked. He's like, man, I thought you were mad. I'm like, dude, at the end of the day, it's my fault.
That's
like,
right.
It's not you. It's like, yes, you can't guess what I want you to do. You can't read my mind.
No, you can't. And, I want to get back to one of the questions you also asked, like what happens when we fail, like when there is failure, and there's going to be failure, right? Yep. And this is a topic that I talk about in the book, Cutting Onions, is that there are 3 questions that every leader needs to ask. Every leader needs to ask. They need to say, okay, what's happening? Like, get clear on what the issue really is. Seek to understand. And because until you understand it correctly, completely, you and your team will never be able to make the improvements that you want to see. So get clear on what's happening. And then I think this is important. I think this is kind of a hidden opportunity for folks when they have a problem, when they have an issue. Is like, the question I like to ask is, what does this make possible? What does this make possible, right? When you had that mistake yesterday in your company, right? We all make mistakes. Like, we can learn from that. Like, okay, what type of process can we make, to improve this? What type of thing can we do to improve the system, the execution of this, right? What does this make possible? And then what are we going to do about it, right? We have the issue. It's there. We know it's there. But now we got to fix it, right? So how do we do that? So by creating this true cooperative environment where the team feels like everyone's engaged, everyone is shooting for the success, you create this open, honest conversation that everyone can latch onto. And so it's, what seems to be happening? What does this make possible? And what are we going to do about it, right? And then when you ask those 3 questions, it just invites that whole feeling of accountability, where, especially as the leader, again, when you're using we, and you're saying, we had this problem happen, we need to fix this problem, and I'm inviting everyone into this conversation. That's just magic.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I think too many times people strive for perfection and they crumble under a failure. It's like, I told a friend of mine the other day, I said, dude, we all fall. If we don't fall, we can't get up. We all break bones. If we don't break bones, they don't get stronger.
Right.
Businesses, if we're perfect at every text and every email and Facebook post and Instagram post, you never get better.
You never do. I mean, you have to fail forward. You have to fail forward. And with that mentality in mind, I mean, I had my former VP of marketing was on my podcast a while back, and she said it's so well. She's like, I feel all the time. I mean, you'll hear me say I'm sorry all the time, but we're gonna fix it. We're gonna get better. We're gonna continue to improve, because if you don't take those risks, if you don't fail, then you're never going to stay innovative, right? You're never going to be on the cutting edge of whatever it is that you're doing, and you're never going to be able to grow.
Yep. Yeah. And to kind of close on that, the thing that comes to mind for me when we're talking about failures and growing and learning from it and leadership, and a lot of what honestly is in this book. And by the way, Amazon, go buy the book, leave a review after you buy the book and read it and say how awesome it is, because it is awesome. But one thing this comes to me all the time, and I heard it the other day from a restaurant client of mine, is I went to a restaurant and I happened to go to the bathroom right when I got there. It was 11 o'clock. They just opened. And the bathroom, there was no soap. Toilet paper was almost gone. I go out. I have lunch. The ketchup is empty. And the opening team is blaming the closing team. Oh, my gosh, they didn't do their job. And then the closing team's like, oh, my God, the opening they always complain. And this person made a comment, and I said, it's neither their fault. No. It's the manager's fault, and above the manager's, the owner's fault. That means there's not a what clearly understood by how to properly close and open a restaurant. And that was what we shot one of America's Best Restaurants episodes a couple weeks ago in Greensboro at a place called the Crazy Crab. And Harris, the owner, talked about. He's like, you see the people. We're talking about systems. He's like, you see the people cleaning. They were behind us cleaning. And we're shooting before. And he goes, the restaurant was spotless when they got here. Our closing crew crushes it every night because of everything. He's like, but you know what? That crew has a system in place that just in case to go through, because I don't want people coming into a dirty restaurant.
Well, let me take it one step further if I can, because I love that story. And this is something that we did at McDonald's. I'm talking, I was in high school. We started doing this, and I just kept it throughout my career because it was so powerful. Instead of bitching about opening and closing, which is kind of what happens in the restaurant industry, right? Especially when you have a culture that's not very good. what we decided to do when we closed at night is how good of a close could we have? How little would the openers have to do when they came in? I mean, Matt, this was so much fun. Like we would set out the egg rings on the grill. We'd make sure the grill was seasoned. We'd literally pull all the product out for them so it was ready to go in the morning. They literally only had to walk in the morning and flip on the grill, flip on the fryer, flip on the English muffin toaster. I mean, it was literally like, so it became a game, right? And then they, in turn, would say, what can we do to make sure the night shift is as ready as possible? And it was so, and like we were doing crazy stuff. Like we would get up at 6 a.m. after closing just to come in on the way to school and make sure that it was perfect. Like, was there anything we could have done differently?
Yeah.
When you have that going on, Matt, that culture is solid gold. I mean, it will carry you forever. And so I love that story. And I love what he had to say about that because he's absolutely right. When you have a system, you have checklists, you have follow-up, you have someone leading. I was just having this conversation today with a client of mine. Like when you have that checklist, you have that routine, you know exactly what you're doing. You can measure everything that you're doing and you know exactly what's happening on your shift. And that's how you make sure that your closes are where you want them to be and that, they're high quality closes. But I love it when you get that teamwork going and that culture of, I'm going to see what I can do to take care of that next shift so much so that they're not going to have to come and do anything except go to work.
Yeah. It becomes a little game.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate your time on this Friday afternoon. Bobby Shaw Consulting is how they can get a hold of you. Who is the ideal person to call Bobby Shaw?
Yeah, you know what? I work with restaurant owners and leaders. So anyone in the leadership development career path of a restaurant, right? If you're having help or if you need help with how to create your culture, how to improve your operations, how to put in processes and systems, I can definitely help you. So I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, that's all we got today. I appreciate your time. Appreciate everybody tuning in.
Hey, thanks, Matt.
Hey, see you later.
All right, take care.